Jimin breaks down on stage after a shocking revelation from Jungkook's father. What he said changed everything. Army is shaken and furious. He was never supposed to be in BTS. The voice echoed like thunder across the otherwise silent backstage area, hitting Jimin like a freight train. Sweat still glistened on his temples from the encore performance. The roar of the stadium faded behind him, replaced by a dreadful stillness. The voice had come from the corner of the dressing room, a deep, cold tone that Jimin had only heard once before. Jungkook's father stood there, expression unreadable, arms crossed over his chest like a judge delivering a final sentence. The words didn't make sense. Not at first. "What did you say?" Jimin asked, though his voice trembled, already knowing he hadn't misheard. Jungkook's father stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "You should have never been in this group. You were chosen out of pity, and you've done nothing but prove them right." The air grew thick, heavy, unbreathable. Jimin couldn't move, couldn't speak. His body froze, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of humiliation and confusion crashing down on him all at once. He didn't see the makeup artist stop in her tracks, didn't notice Taehyung behind the partition holding a bottle of water. His hand clenched so tightly the plastic crumpled in his fist. All he heard were those words, and the silence that followed. Later that night, under the dazzling lights of the final stage, Jimin tried to smile. He waved. He sang. He even twirled the way he always did during Butterfly. But it was all autopilot, muscle memory, until the bridge came. The part where the music dropped, and it was just his voice, trembling with vulnerability. That was when it happened. The first tear escaped before he could stop it. Then another. And another. The stadium, once filled with screams and joy, grew eerily quiet. Tens of thousands of armies held their breath, phones raised, watching in stunned silence as Jimin collapsed to his knees mid-note, his microphone falling from his hand with a thud. Jungkook was at his side in seconds, his expression panicked, one hand gripping Jimin's shoulder while his other tried to shield him from the crowd. The music had stopped. Staff members rushed the stage. Namjoon stood frozen by the piano, unable to process what had just happened. Online, the footage spread like wildfire. The hashtags came instantly. "Jimin, you are loved. Protect Park Jimin." What did Jungkook's dad say? But the real chaos had already begun backstage, long before ARMY started demanding answers. Jimin was taken to the dressing room, face pale and eyes vacant. Jungkook stayed beside him, his jaw clenched, fury brewing beneath the surface. "You heard what he said," Jimin whispered, finally, the words barely audible. Jungkook nodded. He was wrong, was he? Jungkook didn't respond immediately. His hands were shaking. "You saved me, Jimin. Don't you ever let anyone take that away from you?" There was a long pause, and then Jimin, voice still raw, asked the one question he hadn't dared to ask aloud before. "Did I really only make it in because someone felt sorry for me?" This time, it wasn't Jungkook who answered. Yoongi stepped into the room, eyes shadowed with rage. "No," he said, voice low. "You made it in because you bled for it, because you gave everything for it." The tension in the room thickened. No one moved. Outside the stadium, a storm was beginning to swell on social media, in news outlets, in the hearts of millions of fans who had just watched their beloved angel fall apart live on stage. And they wanted to know why. Within hours, a wave of messages flooded Big Hit's headquarters. Demands for an apology, for transparency, for Jungkook's father to be held accountable. The ARMY wasn't just upset, they were enraged. And they were organized. Inside BTS's private world, fractures began to form. Old insecurities, long buried under years of glittering success, began to resurface. Jimin locked himself in his hotel room. Jin tried to mediate. Hoseok grew distant. Jungkook didn't speak to his father again. No one could have predicted how deep the wound would go. And no one, not even the members themselves, knew what secrets would be unearthed in the days to come. Secrets about the early days of their trainee lives, about choices made in desperation, and about a silent battle Jimin had been fighting for years behind closed doors. But this was only the beginning. The truth had started to unravel, and nothing would ever be the same again. You said, lanjutkan episode selanjutnya dengan episode yang lebih panjang, lebih banyak perkapan panas, seru tegang, kontroversial, kejutan dan emosional, dan berikan saya narasi saja dalam bahasa Inggris tanpa menggunakan poin-poin. ChatGPT said, Episode 2. The silence after the storm. You think I didn't hear you that night in the practice room? Jimin's voice sliced through the still air like a blade. He stood at the far end of the hotel suite, fists clenched, chest rising and falling as he glared across the room at Jungkook, who had just slammed the door behind him. Jungkook froze. His hoodie was damp from rain. His eyes, usually soft and unreadable, now burned with confusion and disbelief. That night? Jungkook asked, his voice low. Jimin's lips trembled. The night you called your father. After we got the letter from the company, saying only a few of us would debut. Jungkook's silence was confirmation. I wasn't supposed to hear, right? Jimin laughed, hollow and bitter. But I did. Every word. Jimin's not strong enough. He's not marketable. He's too sensitive to last in this industry. He mimicked Jungkook's voice cruelly, eyes shining with suppressed rage. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I was 17, Jimin. I was scared. You agreed with him, Jimin shouted. You let him plant that seed in your head. And now, years later, he spits it out like it's gospel, and I have to collapse in front of thousands of fans because the person I trusted most didn't say a goddamn thing to stop him. I didn't know he would say that, Jungkook muttered, stepping forward. But you thought it, Jimin snapped. You believed it. A long, electric silence filled the space between them. The rain outside thudded harder against the window panes, muffling the sound of someone crying quietly in the adjacent room, Taehyung, most likely, whose emotional walls had started crumbling the moment Jimin fell on stage. Jungkook ran a hand through his soaked hair. You think I haven't regretted that call every day since? You think I don't hear your voice in my head when I lie awake at night wondering if any of this is real? Jimin scoffed and turned away. You saved me more times than I can count, Jungkook continued, his voice cracking. When I skipped meals, when I nearly dropped out, when I couldn't face my own reflection. You were the one who told me I was enough. Then why didn't you do the same for me? Jimin whispered, not turning back. Outside, a thunderclap cracked the sky in two. At that very moment, Namjoon barged in, his phone in hand, his face pale with dread. It's bad, he said. Jungkook and Jimin looked up. Namjoon tossed the phone onto the table. On the screen was a leaked video clip, grainy, secretly recorded, but the audio was unmistakable. Jungkook's father, his voice clear, harsh. He was just a charity case. I told the company, don't let emotions decide. But they wanted a sob story. They wanted someone the fans could pity. And Park Jimin? Perfect. Jimin stared at the screen like it was a knife aimed straight at his heart. This was taken at some gala last week, Namjoon said. Someone recorded it and sent it anonymously to dispatch. It's everywhere now. Hyung, shut it off, Jungkook said hoarsely. No, Jimin said. Let it play. The rest of the clip was worse. Accusations that Jimin had used his tears as strategy, that he was too fragile to handle pressure, that his presence in BTS had always been a PR decision. By the time it ended, Jungkook had sunk into the nearest chair, head in his hands. Jimin remained standing, unmoving, his eyes dry but empty. Yoongi entered next, followed by Taehyung, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hoseok stood by the door, jaw tight. So we're doing this now? Yoongi said. We're going to finally talk about all the shit we buried for years? Maybe it's time, Taehyung whispered. We can't keep pretending everything's perfect when someone's bleeding in front of us. There was a silence. Then Namjoon nodded. We're putting out a statement, the leader said. We'll make it clear that Jimin is family, that what was said was cruel and unfounded. And what about the fans? Hoseok asked. They want blood. They want to know why Jungkook's father would say something like that. I'll go live, Jungkook said suddenly. They all turned. I'll go live tonight, he repeated. And I'll tell them everything. Jimin's head snapped toward him. You don't have to. I do, Jungkook cut in. Not for the fans, for you. That night, Jungkook went live on Weverse. No filter, no management script, no edits. Just him in a dark room, his face half lit by a desk lamp, eyes tired and red. He apologized. He explained the call from years ago. He admitted his silence. He wept. And for the first time, he told the world about the guilt he had carried for not defending his friend when it mattered most. The fandom exploded. Some forgave him, others didn't, but all of them listened. And then The biggest shock of all, an email leaked from a former big hit staffer, anonymously sent to multiple journalists. Attached were transcripts and meeting notes from 2013 documents proving that Park Jimin had almost been cut from the group weeks before debut. The reasoning? Too emotionally unstable, lacks star appeal. Jungkook has expressed concerns. The betrayal scorched like wildfire. Jimin didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. When he finally emerged, it was for one reason only: the fans. BTS had a scheduled fan meeting in Seoul, one they couldn't cancel without causing more chaos. At the venue, Jimin wore a simple black sweater and no makeup. He stood on stage with the others, but slightly apart. The fans noticed. A little girl in the front row held up a sign. "Jimin, you taught me how to love myself." Jimin saw it. He smiled, but his eyes shimmered, and then he said into the mic, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." The room erupted in cheers. But behind the stage, something darker was beginning to take shape. The anonymous email sender wasn't finished. They had more. More files. More secrets. More buried truths that no one was ready to face. The storm had only just begun. "You're not supposed to be here." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The sharpness in Bang PD's voice was enough to silence the room. The members of BTS sat in their private meeting room at Hybe's headquarters. Dimly lit, sterile, walls lined with plaques that once symbolized dreams, now shadows of something else. Jimin sat furthest from the head of the table, hood over his head, arms folded tightly across his chest like armor. Opposite him sat the man responsible for their legacy. But today, he wasn't a visionary. Today, he was a man cornered. "I'm not here for your permission," Yoongi said, standing. His eyes were darker than usual, jaw clenched. "I'm here because I saw the files." Bang PD's lips barely moved. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't insult me." Yoongi threw a printed sheet across the table. It skidded, stopping inches from Jimin. He didn't touch it, didn't even look. Jungkook did. His face drained of color. "This is," he whispered. "A trainee evaluation," Yoongi said, voice razor sharp. "From September 2012. Signed off by you. It says, and I quote, Jimin's dance ability is exceptional, but mentally weak. Jungkook doesn't trust him to carry stage presence. Consider replacement with Taehyung." The room froze. Jin leaned forward. "Taehyung? As in the kid from the 2012 auditions?" Namjoon's eyes narrowed. "He was cut after the second round." "He was brought back," Yoongi said coldly. "Just in case. A backup. In case Jimin cracked." A long silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Outside, the sounds of Seoul life continued: cars, rain, a distant siren. But in here, time had stopped. Taehyung finally spoke. "You were going to replace him?" "No," Bang PD said too quickly. "We discussed it. We never moved forward." "But you kept the notes," Hoseok said. "And when things got hard, when Jimin was struggling in 2018, you brought them up again, didn't you?" Bang PD's silence was louder than denial. Jimin didn't speak. He stared down at the table, still, unmoving, until finally, he whispered, "So, I was never really one of you?" "No," Jungkook said, rising from his seat, voice raw. "Don't do that. Don't twist this into proof you weren't meant to be here. None of us were supposed to make it. You earned your place." "Then why didn't anyone tell me?" Jimin snapped, standing now, face flushed with emotion. "Why did I have to find out through a leaked file? Through documents passed around like my worth was a negotiation?" "Because we were afraid," Namjoon said, eyes heavy with guilt. "Because we thought we were protecting you." "I don't need protection," Jimin roared. "I needed honesty. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me the truth." Yoongi's voice dropped to a low growl. "There's more." Jungkook's head whipped toward him. "More?" Yoongi nodded. "There's a folder, password protected, hidden on a private server linked to old company archives. Someone sent me the credentials anonymously. I opened it this morning." He looked at Jimin. "It's filled with video footage. Behind the scenes clips from our trainee days. Some were edited. Some weren't." Bang PD's composure cracked for the first time. That footage was never meant to be seen. Yoongi ignored him. It includes a conversation between your father and a company director. March 2013, 1 week before we were confirmed as a lineup. Jungkook's breath caught. What did he say? Yoongi's gaze hardened. He offered money. The words hit like a bullet. What? Jin said, voice breaking. He offered to invest in the company quietly, discreetly, in exchange for Jungkook getting solo privileges, more lines, and a stronger debut push. And for one member to be cut. No one said it, but they all knew. Jimin. The room fractured in an instant. Jungkook stood as if to speak, then sat back down, head in his hands. That can't be true, he said. That can't be true, but Yoongi said nothing. Bang PD stood. This ends now. None of this matters anymore. BTS is global. We've built a legacy. Jimin laughed bitterly. Built on what? Silence? Deals made in back rooms while we were kids fighting for our lives? You think I didn't see it? Taehyung said suddenly. How you treated him differently. How you stopped giving him main parts after the first year. The way every critique hit him harder? You let him carry your guilt, Hoseok added, staring directly at Bang PD. And you let us pretend it wasn't happening. I won't apologize for business decisions, Bang PD said. I made calls to protect the group. You made calls to protect the brand, Namjoon said coldly. But the group? That's us. And we were never whole without Jimin. Silence again, this time colder, more final. Jimin turned to leave. Jungkook reached for his arm, but Jimin pulled away. Don't, Jimin said quietly. Hyung, please. You knew, Jimin said, not turning back. Even if you didn't agree, you knew. And then he walked out. That night, the group sat on the dorm rooftop under the rain, not speaking. The leaks had gone public now. Journalists had picked up the story. Fans were in chaos, and the company was scrambling. Jungkook didn't sleep. He sat alone in the practice room, watching old videos of rehearsals, of laughter, of Jimin throwing his head back mid-spin and smiling like he belonged there. And then he did something he'd never done before. He called his father. The phone rang 3 times. Jungkook, came the voice. Don't speak, Jungkook said. Just listen. There was silence. You hurt him. You humiliated him. And you lied to me. You offered money to destroy someone I love. I don't care what your reasons were. I don't want to hear from you again. Son, I'm not your son, Jungkook said. Not anymore. He hung up. Meanwhile, Jimin sat alone on a rooftop elsewhere in Seoul. Headphones in, eyes closed. The wind howled, cold and sharp. In his hand was a letter, one he'd written 5 years ago. A resignation letter, back when he thought he wouldn't make it. He hadn't thrown it away. He unfolded it slowly, looked at the ink, the desperation in his own handwriting, and then he tore it in half. Because maybe, just maybe, this time he'd choose to fight back. Let him in. The staff member hesitated in the doorway, eyes darting between the tense group of BTS members and the man waiting outside the glass-walled conference room. The man who, just days ago, had detonated everything they'd built over a decade. He's not on the guest list, she murmured. I said let him in, Jimin repeated, his voice calm but lethal. It was the first time Jimin had stepped foot inside Hybe since the leak. Wordless tension rippled across the room as Jungkook's father entered. Suit crisp, eyes cold, lips pinched into a polite but joyless smile. The man who had once stood on the sidelines of their concerts with pride now stood accused, isolated, and surprisingly unfazed. He took the empty seat across from Jimin, as if this were a negotiation. Jimin didn't look away. You wanted to talk, he said. Now talk. Jungkook's father placed a manila envelope on the table and slid it forward. I came to clarify things, he said. This has gone too far. You made it go this far, Yoongi said darkly. The older man ignored him. What you heard, what was leaked, those were private conversations taken out of context. Jimin opened the envelope. Inside were copies of internal memos, banking records, and typed statements, some bearing the old Big Hit logo. They documented not only discussions about replacing Jimin, but timelines of financial transfers made during BTS's pre-debut and early debut era. And at the center of it, Jungkook's father. I didn't bribe anyone, he said defensively. I made a business investment. This company was on the verge of collapse. I helped it stay afloat. I never said Park Jimin should be cut. You said I was a charity case, Jimin interrupted, voice flat. On record, in front of donors, in front of company directors. That was a misjudgment. Not a misjudgment, Jungkook said, his voice low with fury. It was what you really think. Still think. I didn't come here to be attacked, his father snapped. No, Jimin said, leaning forward. Then what did you come for? Redemption? Forgiveness? A press statement to clear your name? You came to the wrong room. Silence. Taehyung's leg bounced restlessly under the table. Hoseok's jaw clenched. Namjoon stared at the floor as if trying to hold back an explosion. I gave everything for this group, Jimin said, his voice rising now like fire catching wind. I bled on stage. I starved myself. I trained until my body gave out. And every time I doubted myself, I thought, no, they chose me. I belong here. And now I find out that behind closed doors, people like you were betting on my failure. You weren't supposed to hear that, Jungkook's father muttered. Jimin stood suddenly, his chair screeching back. But I did. And now so did the whole world. You're acting like I'm the villain, he shot back. But this is the industry. Tough decisions. Sacrifices. It's not personal. It's always personal when you try to erase someone, Namjoon said sharply. Especially someone who gave you everything. The room erupted. You think this is normal? Yoongi snarled. Sabotaging a kid's future for leverage? Jimin was 17. 17. You played God, Hoseok added. And then walked away like none of it mattered. Jungkook's father looked at his son. Are you really going to throw away your family for this? I'm not throwing away my family, Jungkook said, his voice shaking with restrained rage. I'm finally protecting it. Another silence fell. This one, sharp, final, the older man stood. Then there's nothing left to say. He turned and walked out, footsteps echoing down the corridor like the last page of a nightmare. Jimin stood motionless, chest heaving. Then, slowly, Namjoon walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, What do you want to do now? Jimin didn't answer for a long time. Then, I want to tell my story. He looked around the room at his brothers, all of them battle-worn, eyes red and swollen with rage, guilt, exhaustion, but also loyalty. I'm tired of being silent. I'm tired of protecting people who would have watched me fall. If the world's going to judge me, they should know the whole truth. Namjoon nodded. We'll stand with you. But Jimin shook his head. I'll do this one alone. The next day, Jimin sat in front of a camera. No filters, no retakes, no label representatives hovering behind the lens. It was just him, a plain gray background, and the truth. He pressed record. My name is Park Jimin. I'm a member of BTS, and I've been quiet for too long. What followed was a 30-minute monologue, raw, unscripted, and devastating. He spoke of the pressure to perform, the internalized shame, the hidden cuts and bruises, the near exits, the tears in dormitory bathrooms when no one was watching. He spoke of dancing until his legs gave out, smiling when his world was breaking, waking up afraid that today might be the day they'd tell him he wasn't needed anymore. He spoke of trust, of betrayal, and of love. I stayed, he said, eyes glassy but clear, because this group means everything to me. Because the fans made me believe I was more than what they said behind closed doors. Because every time I wanted to quit, someone held my hand. Jungkook, Taehyung, Hoseok, all of them. Even when they didn't know they were saving me, they were. The video went viral in minutes. Jimin Truth trended worldwide. Celebrities, musicians, activists all voiced support. The Korean music industry trembled. Former trainees came forward. A hidden underbelly of the idol system began to surface. Backroom deals, conditional contracts, invisible strings. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear. Jimin had reclaimed his voice, and the industry was listening. Hype scrambled. Press conferences were planned, apologies drafted. Bang PD himself went on national TV, trying to control the damage. But the public had seen the human behind the idol, and they were choosing him. Late that night, Jimin returned to the dorm. The others were waiting. He stepped through the door, quiet. Then he looked at Jungkook. I wasn't sure if you'd still want me here. Jungkook walked up to him, eyes fierce. I never wanted you gone. Then he pulled him into a tight, silent hug. The kind that speaks louder than anything else. Jimin let himself cry this time. Not out of pain, but out of release. And somewhere deep inside, something that had long been fractured began to mend. "You can't just leave," Namjoon's voice echoed through the practice room. Walls still trembling from the aftermath of the news Jimin had just dropped like a bomb. The scent of sweat and vinyl flooring lingered in the air, but the tension swallowed everything else. Jimin stood in front of them, arms crossed, a black cap pulled low over his eyes. But even with half his face in shadow, everyone could see it. He was serious. "I'm not leaving the group," he said calmly. "I'm just not following the damn script anymore." The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was confusion. Sharp and bitter. "What script?" Taehyung asked slowly, voice tight. Jimin looked at each of them. "You really want to pretend you don't know?" Hoseok shifted in his seat near the mirror, his reflection twitching with unease. "Every year," Jimin said, pacing now, "they hand us those sanitized interview guides. What to say, what not to say, what parts of our past are off limits, how to tell our story so it fits the brand. But after everything that's come out, how can we keep playing along? We've always edited ourselves," Jin said quietly. "Editing is one thing," Jimin snapped. "Being erased is another." Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what are you saying? That we go rogue? Burn the whole system down?" "I'm saying," Jimin replied, "that I'm done performing loyalty for people who wouldn't even admit I belonged here." Yoongi watched silently from the corner, eyes unreadable. "They called a press conference," Namjoon said after a long pause. "Hybe, tomorrow, they want us to read a joint statement, a unified front. They say it'll help with damage control." "Damage control," Jimin scoffed. "What are we leaking products? They'll bury us if we go against them," Taehyung said, his voice tight with dread. "You think they'll just let you speak freely? They still have those contracts. Let them try," Jimin said, his voice suddenly steely. "I'll rip every clause apart in court. I'd rather lose everything than keep lying." The words hit the room like a grenade. Jungkook stood now. "We should all go with him." Yoongi raised an eyebrow. "To war? To truth," Jungkook said. "This is our life, our name, our story. If we don't own it, they will." Namjoon exhaled sharply. "We need to think, strategize. This can't be impulsive." "It's not impulsive," Jimin said. "It's a decade of silence finally breaking open." The next day, chaos erupted outside Hybe headquarters. Reporters flooded the entrance. Fans stood behind barricades, chanting Jimin's name, holding signs that read, "No more silence. You belong," and "Burn the lies." Inside, the atmosphere was toxic with forced civility. Polished PR executives waited like vultures, shoving printed scripts into the members' hands as they entered the green room. Bottled water, lip balm, cue cards. Jimin stared at the papers. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a pre-approved statement," said one of the media managers, smiling too tightly. "We've worked hard to make sure it reflects remorse and unity. I'm not reading this." "Well, it's not optional." Jimin raised his gaze slowly. "You think I care?" The manager faltered. Across the room, Jungkook stood, crumpled his own script, and dropped it on the table. "He's not reading it. None of us are." The manager's face paled. "If you go off script..." "What?" Jimin stepped forward. "You'll cut my lines again? Edit me out of the footage? Try to replace me with someone more marketable? You're being emotional." "No, I'm being honest." The door burst open. Bang PD entered, eyes blazing. "What the hell is going on?" Namjoon rose to meet him. "We're not reading your version of our story. You're destroying everything we've built. You destroyed it the moment you chose silence over truth." Bang PD walked straight up to Jimin, face inches from his. "You think you're bigger than the group now?" "No," Jimin said. "I am the group. We all are. Not your files, not your investors, not your damage control." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Yoongi stood. "We're doing this our way." "We're not at all." Bang PD didn't answer, just turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. An intern peeked in seconds later, wide-eyed. "You're on in 5. Jimin looked at the others. "Last chance. Anyone wants to back out, do it now. No hard feelings." Jungkook stepped beside him. "I started this by staying silent. I'm not ending it that way." Taehyung nodded, jaw tight. "Let them come for us." Namjoon grabbed the torn cue cards. "Then let's give them a story worth telling." When they stepped onto the stage, the press room exploded with flashes and noise, hundreds of cameras, dozens of reporters, live broadcasts beaming across the globe. The moderator introduced them. BTS will now deliver a prepared statement. No, Jimin interrupted, stepping to the microphone. We'll speak for ourselves. And then he began. I was never supposed to last here. That's what they said. That I was fragile, a placeholder, a face for pity. But I'm still here, and I won't let my voice be rewritten. Every word hit like a slap. Jungkook spoke next. I allowed things to happen that I didn't understand at the time. And when I did understand, I stayed quiet. I regret that more than anything. One by one, each member took the mic, told their truths. Not all pretty, not all clean, but real. When it ended, the room didn't applaud. It was too stunned. But online, the world erupted. BTS tells the truth. Jimin unfiltered. Not just. Anecdotal. Millions of tweets. Op-eds. Fan letters. Even politicians weighed in. For the first time, the machinery of the K-pop industry trembled under the force of collective honesty. But with the truth came consequences. HYBE's stock dropped overnight. Investors panicked. Board members demanded resignations. And Bang PD? Gone. Stepped down voluntarily. Though the whispers told a different story. But the biggest shock came 2 days later. A video surfaced. Not leaked. Posted. By Taehyung, the trainee, who was almost Jimin's replacement. He was older now, a forgotten name to most. But his face appeared on screen. Solemn. I was there, he said. I was told I'd be part of BTS if Park Jimin couldn't handle the pressure. I wasn't good enough, and I always blamed him. But now I know he was never the problem. The system was. His confession only deepened the fire. More ex-trainees came forward. Stories of manipulation, exploitation, silent pain behind glittering dreams. The industry could no longer hide. And Jimin? He stood in the eye of the storm, calm and whole for the first time in years. They had tried to erase him, but now the world was watching because of him. He no longer had to fight for space in the frame. The frame was his. You all signed the contract, the lawyer said coldly, voice echoing against the glass conference room. Every clause, every non-disclosure, every silence. Jimin stared at the man like he was a mirror made of smoke. The weight of betrayal settled in his chest, not new, but heavier now, more intricate, poisoned by layers of legality and quiet threats. He didn't look at the papers in front of him. He didn't have to. He knew what was written. He remembered signing it, hands trembling, back when he thought survival meant obedience. I was a teenager, Jimin said. We all were. That doesn't make it right. Across the table, HYBE's new legal representative didn't blink. You're in breach, Park Jimin. Public statements contradicting official company narratives, disclosure of internal practices, inciting media defamation. You've opened yourself and your members to liability beyond your understanding. Yoongi leaned forward slowly, eyes narrow, controlled fury, crackling beneath his skin like a loaded wire. You think we're scared of the law now? He said. After everything you buried? We are the law, the lawyer said. Contracts are not a suggestion, and dignity isn't a luxury, Jimin countered, finally lifting his gaze. Try me. The man flinched, not visibly, but enough for Jimin to catch the twitch of his jaw. Jungkook stood up without a word, crossed to the window, fists clenched at his sides, soul stretched beyond the glass, clean, glittering, oblivious. But inside this room, nothing was clean anymore. They'll go after you first, Namjoon said to Jimin, voice low. That's what this is. Isolate you. Make you the symbol of rebellion. Easier to fracture us that way. Let them, Jimin said. No. Jungkook finally spoke, his voice hollow. They'll come for me too. He turned slowly, eyes landing on Jimin. I knew what my father did, he said. Not all of it, but I knew enough. And I stayed quiet because I thought I could protect you by keeping you close. Everyone fell silent. I thought if I became irreplaceable, they'd stop threatening you. Jungkook, Jimin whispered, pain rippling through every syllable. I became their weapon instead, Jungkook continued. They gave me more parts, more promotions, and I let it happen. I thought I could use it to shield you, but all I did was leave you exposed. You were a child, Jin said quietly. We both were, Jimin said, but there was no anger in his voice now, just sorrow. They used us against each other, they always did. The door opened suddenly. Hosok entered, eyes wide. Turn on the news. No one moved. He grabbed the remote, pointed it at the screen on the far wall. The monitor flickered to life. KBS News, midday broadcast. The headline read, Exclusive. HYBE Insider confirms forced trainee contracts, BTS members included. Below it was a live interview, a pixelated figure, a voice distorted by tech filters. But the information was clear, explicit, explosive. The contracts were structured to exploit fear, the voice said. We were told BTS was a gamble. The company used leverage over younger trainees to control behavior. Some members had to sign additional clauses. Park Jimin's was the harshest. Emotional instability was listed as a justification for termination at any time. Namjoon stood, eyes wide. Who is that? Yoongi stared at the screen. That's someone from legal. I recognize the voice. That's Min Chae, Sook. She left in 2016. She's breaking NDA, Taehyung said. Hard. She's confirming everything. Jimin whispered. The interview continued. They kept a file on him, the voice said. Jimin. They called it Liability Archive. It contained surveillance, counseling reports, performance reviews with emotionally coded language. It wasn't for support. It was for control. Silence. Not a single breath was taken in the room for several seconds. And then, Hosok turned to Jimin slowly. They were never planning to keep you. Jimin laughed, but it was dry, lifeless. No, they were planning to use me, for as long as I made them look good. Jungkook walked up to him and held out something. The old trainee ID card Jimin had lost in 2013. Scuffed, bent, a face of a boy trying too hard to look fearless. I found this in the storage room, Jungkook said. You hid it. Why? Because I hated who I was back then, Jimin said. Because I thought he was weak, that if anyone ever saw how scared he looked, they'd agree with everything those files said. Then let them see it now, Jungkook said. Show them he survived. Taehyung reached into his phone and pulled up the fan archive account he secretly ran where old videos, photos, and unreleased cuts of BTS's early days were preserved. Let's leak everything, he said. Namjoon turned sharply. What? All of it, Taehyung said. Not the edited promos. The real footage. The raw practices. The breakdowns. The nights we fought. The days we thought we'd disband. All of it. You want to air everything? Yoongi asked. If they want a war, Taehyung said, then let the fans see what we actually fought. Jimin looked at each of them, his family, and felt something bloom in his chest that had been dead for years. Hope, he nodded. Do it. That night, the uploads began. Clips, scans, voice recordings, from dusty hard drives, from hidden folders, from email chains, long forgotten. The story of BTS, unfiltered, unapproved, undeniable. The internet exploded. The world shifted. And HYBE? They went quiet. The walls were cracking. The machine was failing. And Jimin? He stood at the center of it all. Not as a pawn, not as a liability, but as a revolution. The elevator stopped on the 49th floor with a soft chime, but the tension inside felt like it could split the steel doors open. Jimin stood silently, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders tense beneath a heavy black coat. Beside him, Yoongi exhaled slowly and cracked his knuckles, a habit that always surfaced before something catastrophic. The others waited below. Namjoon had insisted only Jimin and Yoongi go in first. It wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was strategy. When the doors slid open, they stepped into the executive floor of HYBE. Everything gleamed, glass, gold, marble, and yet it all felt hollow now, like a palace built on bones. At the far end of the corridor stood Min Chae Sook. She looked nothing like she had on TV. No disguise now, no voice distortion. Just a worn woman in her late 30s, eyes sharp with purpose. She held a USB in one hand and a manila folder tucked under her arm. Behind her, a glass-walled office loomed. Inside sat Chairman Wu, HYBE's new board director. flanked by two corporate lawyers who barely looked up as the idols entered. "Is this what you wanted?" Jae-suk said, holding the USB out to Jimin. He didn't take it yet. "What's on it?" "Everything," she said. "Meeting transcripts, confidential memos, emails, and the full contents of the liability archive. Every internal document written about you from 2012 to 2020. Evaluations, surveillance summaries, therapist reports you never saw." Yoongi stepped forward. "Why now?" "Because when I watched Jimin's live stream, I realized I was still protecting monsters," Jae-suk said. "And I'm done." Jimin finally reached out and took the USB, gripping it like it was an exposed nerve. His mouth was dry. He hadn't even prepared for what he'd feel, holding proof of the things he'd always feared were real. Chairman Woo's voice echoed from inside the office. "Bring them in." Jimin didn't move at first, but Yoongi touched his shoulder lightly, and they both stepped inside. The office was cold, air-conditioned, sterile, walls lined with awards and photos of global stages. BTS's framed platinum records hung beside corporate certificates. The irony was suffocating. "Sit," Chairman Woo said, gesturing to two empty seats. Neither of them did. "We received word that you've been leaking proprietary media," the chairman began. "That you've been making inflammatory statements that jeopardize not only your brand, but our shareholders' trust." "I've been telling the truth," Jimin said, "and the fans deserve the real story." "That's not your decision to make," one of the lawyers replied sharply. Jimin held up the USB. "Then maybe this is—" The room fell silent. "You want to sue me?" Jimin continued. "Go ahead. But I'll release everything. Every document, every file, every timestamp. Try to silence me, and I will make sure you're remembered as the company that exploited children to build an empire." "You're threatening us with our own history," Chairman Woo said. "No," Yoongi interjected. "We're giving you a chance to tell it right." The lawyer scoffed. "What do you want?" Jimin stepped closer to the desk. "I want control over my name, my image, my story. I want the right to tell the world who I was and who I became without your filters." "And if we say no?" Yoongi shrugged. "Then enjoy explaining to shareholders why half of Army is organizing a class action campaign against you tomorrow." Chairman Woo stared at them for a long time. Then finally, he leaned back. "Leave the files. Give us 24 hours. 24 hours, Jimin repeated, "and then the rest goes public." They turned and walked out. On the way down, neither spoke. But in the elevator, Jimin finally said, "It's strange. I thought I'd feel powerful, holding that USB." "And?" Yoongi asked. "I just feel tired." Yoongi nodded. "That's what fighting does. But keep going. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you're carrying the weight they dropped on you years ago." When they returned to the van, the others were waiting. Jungkook was pacing. Namjoon looked like he hadn't blinked in minutes. Taehyung sat in the back with a camera in his lap, filming everything his personal archive of their unraveling and resurrection. "They're stalling," Jimin said. "We give them 24 hours. And then we go nuclear?" Hosaka asked. Jimin didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Jimin opened the manila folder alone. Inside were printed memos, annotated by senior staff. One read, "Jimin's episodes are becoming more frequent. Consider limiting solo lines. Public image depends on emotional stability." Another, "Risk of breakdown on tour high. Suggest rotating him out for upcoming US promotions." The final one was scrawled in handwriting he recognized. "Bang PDs. He cries beautifully, but it's not sustainable." Jimin stared at that line until his vision blurred. He didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, he picked up his phone and called his mother. "Ioma," he said softly. "Do you remember when I told you I felt like I was living someone else's dream?" "I remember," she said gently. "I think I just found out whose dream it was." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "And now, I want to build my own." The next morning, the 24 hours passed. No call, no email, no offer, nothing. So Jimin pressed upload. The full archive, every document, every minute of manipulated footage, every internal memo. He released it under a public link, no watermark, no paywall, just truth, raw and unfiltered. The response was instant and volcanic. News networks went wall to wall. Psychologists debated on national television about the trauma of idol culture. International human rights organizations called for investigations. Hashtags flooded every platform. Jimin deserved better. BTS history exposed. Idol not property. But the most unexpected thing came from inside the company itself. Hundreds of trainees, former, current, anonymous, began sharing their own stories. The hidden bruises, the secret therapy sessions they paid for themselves. The meals skipped, the voices lost, the dignity sold for a chance to stand under a light that was never really theirs. And through it all, Jimin stayed quiet. He watched, listened, and waited. Until 3 days later, Hybe called. They didn't want to negotiate. They wanted to surrender. The chairman resigned. The lawyers withdrew. And Jimin? He stepped onto a private stage that night. No set. No camera crew. Just him and a mic. A live stream for fans. Millions tuned in. "I didn't do this to destroy anything," he said. "I did this to be free." And somewhere in that massive silence, someone wrote in the comments, "You didn't break BTS. You saved it." And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The door slammed hard enough to make the windows tremble. "Stop avoiding it," Taehyung snapped, standing in the center of the studio with fire in his eyes. "You said you wanted truth, Young. So tell me, why didn't you tell us everything?" Jimin didn't turn around. He was staring at a wall of old rehearsal footage, projected silently onto the big white screen behind him. Images flickered across the surface. His 17-year-old self, stumbling in choreography, biting the inside of his cheek when the instructor rolled his eyes, then clapping politely when Jungkook was praised. "I didn't think it mattered anymore," Jimin muttered. Taehyung took a step closer. "It mattered then. It matters now. You let us carry on like everything was fine. Like we were all in this together from day one when half of us didn't even know how close they were to replacing you." Jimin turned slowly, his eyes unreadable. "So what? Now you're mad at me?" Taehyung laughed bitterly. "I'm mad because I didn't see it. Because I should have. You were right next to me, and I didn't see it." Jimin opened his mouth, but Taehyung cut him off. "You smiled when your solos got cut. You laughed when staff forgot to mic you for interviews. You apologized when fans asked why you were in the back row again. And we let you." Jimin's jaw tightened. "You didn't let me. I chose it. I thought if I made myself smaller, it would hurt less when they finally decided to cut me." "And when they didn't?" Taehyung asked. Jimin looked away. "I never believed it was real." A heavy silence fell. Outside, the city was glowing in neon and fog. Inside, the air felt thick with unsaid things. Taehyung's voice softened. "You told the world, but you didn't tell us." Jimin finally faced him. "Because the world only needed my story. You needed the truth. And I didn't know if you'd survive it." Taehyung blinked hard. "You think we're that fragile?" "No," Jimin whispered. "I think I am." The door creaked open. Jungkook stepped in, eyes cautious, face unreadable. "I heard everything," he said. Jimin let out a soft sigh. "Of course you did." Jungkook crossed the room. "You don't have to hide anymore, Hyung." "Old habits," Jimin said with a tired smile. Jungkook looked at the projection still playing behind them, their younger selves dancing to exhaustion, tripping over the same counts, falling down and pretending it didn't hurt. "I found something," he said suddenly. "In the archive." Jimin's body tensed. "What?" "A file that was never published. A song." Jimin froze. Jungkook walked over to the console, plugged in a drive, and loaded it. The room filled with static. Then the soft hum of a demo track one Jimin hadn't heard since 2014. A song he had written alone in the dorm stairwell after a fight with Bang PD about being too emotional to be a leader figure. "I buried that," Jimin said. "They didn't," Jungkook replied. "It was labeled pending, not suitable for image." The track began to play. A raw, vulnerable melody. No auto-tune, no polish. Just Jimin's voice, cracked and honest. "If I break, will anyone stay? If I cry, will you still sing my name?" Taehyung's eyes shimmered. "You wrote this back then?" he whispered. "I didn't think anyone would ever hear it." Jimin said. Then let them, Jungkook said. Let them hear all of it. Jimin stared at him. It's not a comeback track. It's not even finished. Exactly, Jungkook said. Let's not finish it. Let's leave it raw. Let them hear what they weren't supposed to. Yoongi entered the room then, hands in his pockets. The board offered a deal. Everyone turned. They'll restore full creative rights to all of us, Yoongi said. Retroactively credit every song we were denied authorship on. And they'll issue a formal apology on camera. No money? Hoseok asked, appearing behind him. None, Yoongi replied. Just truth. Full ownership. Legacy restoration. Jin stepped in last. And they'll make one more change. All decisions about BTS from now on must go through us. No more boardroom approvals. We are the board now. Jimin blinked. They really folded that easily? Yoongi shook his head. No. The sponsors folded. The board followed the money. Namjoon entered, holding a phone. It's live, he said. The members gathered. On the screen, the chairman stood behind a podium. Pale. Shaken. We acknowledge that the management of BTS has not always upheld the values we claim to represent. There were actions taken silently, deliberately, that harmed the well-being and autonomy of certain members, particularly Park Jimin. Gasps echoed across the live stream. The company offers its unreserved apology to Jimin and to all members. Moving forward, all rights to their image, music, and historical archive will be returned to them, effective immediately. Jimin's heart pounded. He sat down slowly, eyes wide. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just exhaled, like he was finally breathing for the first time. A notification buzzed. Millions of comments. We see you now. You never needed their approval. Park Jimin, our truth. He looked up. Namjoon knelt beside him. You okay? No, Jimin said. But I'm getting there. Then let's get there together. They sat in silence, watching the public statement end. Then Jungkook whispered, Let's finish the song, Hyung. Together. One take. No edits. Jimin hesitated, then nodded. They turned back to the console, loaded the old project file. The room lit with the quiet hum of anticipation. And as the first beat played, Jimin stepped up to the mic. Voice steady, heart loud. Ready. No script. No makeup. No fear. Just truth. And it was beautiful. Don't touch that fader. Jimin's voice snapped through the recording booth like a whip. The engineer, startled, froze mid-motion, fingers hovering above the console. Everyone in the studio fell still. You were lowering my mic, Jimin said, stepping out from behind the glass. His tone wasn't angry. It was surgical, cold, focused. Why? The engineer stuttered, glancing at one of the executives sitting by the back wall. The executive, tall, slick, anonymous behind dark-rimmed glasses, didn't speak. But Jimin already knew. He always knew. I said, Jimin continued, walking toward the console. Why? The engineer dropped his gaze. They told me your vocal needed to sit under Jungkook's. Under? Jungkook said from the couch, his voice sharp. What the hell does that even mean? Balance, the executive finally spoke. Just balance for the final mix. No, Jimin said. Not this time. Yoongi stood slowly from the armrest of the sofa. We said we'd mix it ourselves. And we allowed studio access for support, the executive replied calmly. Not insubordination. Hoseok's laughter cracked through the tension. You're calling standing up for our own voices insubordination now? Don't do this, the executive said. You won. You got your apology. You got the files. Don't turn it into martyrdom. You still don't get it, Namjoon said, rising to his feet. We're not fighting for compensation anymore. We're fighting for history. The executive stood now, too. Your history has already been rewritten. And whose pen was that? Jimin challenged. Silence. Jungkook walked to the console and slid the fader back to where Jimin's vocal belonged, center, full, unburied. We're not here to be remixed into something palatable, he said. We're here to finish the story. The executive looked at each of them in turn, then scoffed. Do what you want. But you're all digging your own graves. You mean writing our own legacy? Taehyung said quietly from the corner. The man walked out without another word. As the door shut, a long silence lingered, uneasy but powerful. Yoongi sat back down at the console. Let's do it again. But this time, no one edits a single breath. The track restarted. A slow piano, then strings, Then Jimin's voice, gentle but full of fire. The chorus hit like a wave. You told me silence was survival, but I learned truth is louder than shame. So here I stand, unfiltered, final, say my name, say my name. When the last note rang out, the room didn't move. Not even Namjoon, until Hoseok whispered. That's it. Jungkook nodded. That's the one. Taehyung wiped a tear. We finish with that. But the story wasn't finished. Because just as they saved the final cut, a phone buzzed. Yoongi picked it up, frowned, then froze. Guys, he said, it's Bang PD. Everyone stiffened. Jimin's stomach turned. Yoongi answered, put it on speaker. Hello? He said. Bang PD's voice came through low, worn, careful. I'm not calling to fight. Then why are you calling? Jimin asked. Eyes narrowed. A long silence. I watched the live stream, Bang PD said. I read the files. Everything. I didn't know. All of it. You signed half of it. Jungkook growled. I was trying to protect the company. At our expense? Yoongi replied. I know, Bang PD said. I didn't call to justify. I called to say. I have something you didn't find in the archives. There was a pause. What is it? Namjoon asked. A recording. 2013. Your second group evaluation. It was deleted from the trainee server, but I kept a backup. Something was said in that meeting. Something I regret. It's you, Jimin. You were crying. You said if they cut you, you'd still thank them. Because at least you gotta feel like you belonged once. Jimin blinked hot. I should have stopped the meeting, Bang PD continued. But I let them mock you. Laugh at your voice. Your body. I just watched. I told myself it was for the greater good. No. Jimin said, his voice low and steady. It was for the greater control. Bang PD exhaled. I'm sending it to you, unedited. Use it, or don't. But it belongs to you now. The line went dead. They waited. Seconds later, the file arrived. A grainy audio clip. Fantico. Static. Then Jimin's younger voice, trembling, soft. If I'm not right for this group, I understand. I just wanted to be part of something that made people feel less alone. Even if it's not me, please, let someone carry that. No one spoke. Then present-day Jimin said, play it again, and again, and again. They sat in that room for hours, not rehearsing, not mixing, just listening to the boy they almost lost, the boy who became a revolution. The next morning, the world woke up to something it had never seen before. A music video released with no pre-teasers, no filters, no choreography. Just raw footage, real footage. Jimin, crying in that evaluation room, overlapped with present-day Jimin singing the final chorus. Then the rest of the members joining him one by one. No glitter, no edits, just truth. Army shattered the internet. News outlets scrambled to frame it. Labels around the world whispered about precedent. But none of it mattered. Because something bigger had happened. The power had shifted. From boardrooms to microphones. From shadows to spotlights. From contracts to convictions. And in the middle of it all was Jimin, no longer just a voice, or a face, or a symbol, but a storm, a survivor, a storyteller, and finally, fully, undeniably, the author. The sun was rising over Seoul, a smoldering orange behind the haze. But inside the private dressing room at KSPO Dome, it felt like dusk. Jimin stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his black stage suit with slow, deliberate fingers. His reflection didn't look like the boy from Busan who arrived at Big Hit with wide eyes and a body too bruised by expectation. Nor did he look like the global icon they had manufactured with smoke and mirrors. He looked like both. He looked like someone who had bled, survived, burned down the lie, and walked through the ash to pick up the pieces. The door behind him creaked open. Jungkook stepped in, already mic'd and dressed, his eyes solemn, searching. They're chanting your name outside, he said quietly. Jimin didn't move. Let them. They don't want an apology tonight, Jungkook added. They want the truth. One last time. Jimin finally turned. That's all I have left to give. Jungkook stepped closer. You don't owe them anything, Young. Jimin looked down. That's where you're wrong. I owe them everything. But not the version they fell for, the version I finally let them see. A soft knock echoed. Then Namjoon entered, holding a small envelope. His expression unreadable, his eyes layered with something between pain and pride. "This came for you. Hand-delivered, no name. Just said it was meant for tonight." Jimin took the envelope slowly. The seal was unbroken, the paper thick. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of handwritten words. "I was wrong. You were never fragile. You were dangerous. Because you were real, and I couldn't control that." Bang Seok. Jimin folded the letter quietly and placed it into his jacket pocket. Yoongi, Taehyung, Hoseok, and Jin joined them. Dressed, calm, yet carrying the weight of a decade on their shoulders. Jin looked at the others. "Once we walk out there, it's over." Yoongi corrected him. "No. Once we walk out there, it begins." They walked to the stage in silence. The stadium was already deafening. Armies filled every seat, ocean blue lights swaying, creating a wave of unfiltered love. But this wasn't an ordinary concert. There were no dance breaks, no glittering intros, no commercial breaks between emotion. This was rebirth, the final performance under the old name, the first under their own. As the lights dimmed, a single spotlight hit the stage center. Jimin stepped out alone. A hush fell, thick as smoke. He stood there for a full minute, just breathing. Then he raised the mic. "I was never meant to be the voice," he said. "They told me my voice was too soft, too unstable, that people wouldn't remember it." He looked out into the ocean of fans, some crying, some clutching banners, all holding on. "But you did. You remembered, even when I forgot myself." He paused. "So tonight, before we begin, I want you to hear what they never wanted you to hear." He signaled Yoongi. The lights stayed low. A grainy audio played, the same recording Bang PD had sent. Jimin, age 17, sobbing behind closed doors, begging for a chance to stay. The room held its breath. Then silence. Then chaos. The crowd erupted not with pity, but with rage, with love, with fury and solidarity. Chants of "Jimin, Jimin, Jimin, Jimin" shook the walls. The rest of the members joined him on stage. They performed everything. Old songs, reimagined, tracks that had been censored, lyrics that once lived in notebooks but were never approved. And then the song, the one that started it all, the unreleased Stairwell song. But this time, it was finished. And it was no longer just Jimin's voice. They each had a verse. Jungkook sang about complicity. Yoongi rapped about watching pain and mistaking it for strength. Namjoon told the story of leadership and guilt. Taehyung sang of silence. Hoseok about light that blinded. And Jin? He sang of love, of brotherhood, of the 7 of them holding each other when the world only wanted 6. By the time Jimin's final chorus came, no one was seated. Tears blurred phone. Hands trembled in the air. And Jimin stood center stage, the storm in his chest finally calm. He didn't cry. He smiled. After the last note, the stadium went dark. Then a screen lit up behind them. No label logo. Just one sentence in white text. BTS. Written by BTS. They walked off stage without bows. No encore. But the crowd kept chanting. Long after the lights came on, long after the stadium emptied. They chanted the names of every member. But Jimin's name echoed longest. Backstage, Jimin sat in the dressing room, the cheers muffled through concrete walls. Taehyung walked in, holding his phone. "You've seen it, right?" he asked. "What?" Taehyung showed him a trending video, a clip of a trainee. Young, trembling, looking straight into the camera. "Because of Jimin's sunbeam, I didn't quit. I'm still here." Another clip, a young female idol, crying on live. "I was told my voice wasn't strong enough, until I heard Jimin's." Another clip, a boy with a guitar. "I used to hide my emotions on stage. Then Jimin taught me it's okay to bleed in public." Jimin watched them all. One by one, tears finally came, not from shame, but from the overwhelming, undeniable truth. He had become the very thing they tried to erase. A symbol, a warning, a light. The rest of the members came in, surrounding him in quiet. No one spoke. They didn't need to. And then, softly, Jungkook said, "You changed everything." Jimin wiped his face, laughed through tears. "No," he whispered. "We did." Outside, the sun fully rose. A new day, a new era, unfiltered, Unowned, unwritten, but entirely theirs.